information. But really, guess who's perpetuating all of these kinds of actions? It's the men in this country. And I just want to say to the men in this country, just shut up and step up.
Wow.
Do the
This
right
amendment
thing.
goes directly to the
Okay,
question.
you see I'm a little upset by this.
And both of the sponsors of this bill have repeatedly represented that participation would be voluntary, that it was not mandatory. What this amendment does is it makes clear that that's the case, and that it is the case for employees as well. So this amendment does two things. It, number one, says that an employer can't report on an employee's demographic characteristics without that employee's consent. It's up to the employee whether that information will be reported. And then secondly, it says that the employer cannot take adverse employment action against the employee if he or she chooses to deny consent. And so this amendment, both of the sponsors have argued eloquently that this should be voluntary. Well, this amendment ensures it's voluntary not just for the CEO, but for the individual inventor or researcher.
Mr. Chairman,
Your
voluntary means voluntary. That's it.
Okay.
So it's very clear that no employer can force the employee who happens to be part of a patent application to disclose anything. That's voluntary. So your amendment,
God, when dumb people think
Senator,
they're right.
adds additional unnecessary requirements that have no practical benefit. Voluntary means voluntary.
If I could ask Senator Hirono,
That
what
is
additional
a
requirements
70-year-old,
that have no benefit?
4-year-old.
Oh, the requirement to get an express consent
You just said it was
from the
voluntary,
individual.
but you just said it was voluntary. So
So
why?
why does there need to be an express consent if the employee doesn't, if the employee doesn't want to participate, disclose that information, doesn't have to do so?
How is something
Why is there a
voluntary
need
if
for
there's
an
not
express
consent?
consent?
And is it an unnecessary protection to protect the employee against discrimination and an adverse employment action? Well, why is that unnecessary?
It's
Because-
voluntary, so
Yeah.
any
I'm right.
employer who will take action against an employee based on something that is a voluntary action on the part of the employee, I would say that employee probably has some other kinds of actions to pursue.
Mr. Chairman,
Yo, dumb people fucking thinking they're right is the most annoying thing in the world.
I think we have unity and confusion here. It's either voluntary or it's not. Now, and I'd like to vote for this if it's voluntary. But I don't see the harm in Senator Cruz's amendment. The holder of the patent either gives consent or she doesn't. Now, she has to give informed consent, I assume. That means they have to tell her it's voluntary. But I don't understand what we're arguing about here.
Senator Kennedy,
Because I don't want Republicans to
person
be
who is
right.
involved gives consent by
I was
disclosing
talking.
the
I'm smart.
information. That is consent.
But if I'm a patent holder,
This is not like some operation that you have to give informed consent on.
What?
It's totally
but
voluntary.
you said Senator, I'm really trying to understand why you're disagreeing with Senator Cruz's amendment. If it's voluntary, if I'm a holder of the patent, and you come to me and say, Kennedy, do you want to disclose? And I say, no. That's what Senator Cruz is giving me the right to do. And it would seem to me, if it's voluntary, as you say, and I believe you, Maisie, what's the problem?
Amazing.
The problem is that this amendment is not necessary. If the employee does not want to disclose that information as part of a patent application, where this information, by the way, is kept totally separate, that information is not given.
That's what
And
Fed
that is
said.
it.
That's what
That
Cruz
is
said.
it. That is the decision.
What's wrong with belt and suspenders?
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
You know, why do we want to add additional language that doesn't add anything to the purpose of this
It adds
bill?
protection,
Which
you
is simply to
fucking
collect
weirdo.
data that we currently don't have.
Who gave this person
And
a
don't we
job?
want a vibrant patent system where
Of course we do, but that's
Come on,
not the
Hawaii,
subject,
you got-
Senator.
you're
That's not
smarter
the
than
subject.
this,
The subject
Hawaii.
is the definition of voluntary, and if there's disagreement between the bill's author and a member of this committee, that leads me to believe that it may not be as voluntary as we would like it to be.
Yes. Of course it helps that there are women on that committee, but you know what? I expect the men in this country and the men in this committee, and many of them, believe me, because we all signed on to this letter to demand an FBI investigation, but really, guess who's perpetuating all of these kinds of actions? It's the men in this country, and I just want to say to the men in this country, just shut up and step up.
Wow.
Do the right thing for a change. Okay, you can see I'm a little upset by this, you know, the fairness of it, but you have a second question?